You always think you'll just know when something is wrong. Like some internal alarm will blare loud enough to cut through the noise of daily life. But for me, the first real warning didn't come from a gut feeling. It came from a mailbox. I had just gotten back from a 3-day business trip in Atlanta. The usual grind: presentations, networking, hotel coffee that tasted like burnt cardboard. The flight home was delayed, my cab driver was half asleep at the wheel, and by the time I pulled into our driveway, all I wanted was a long shower and a decent night's sleep. Maybe even one of Lana's late-night talks on the couch. She was good at those, making things feel lighter than they were. She wasn't home when I arrived. Texted me that she was grabbing drinks with some friends from her creative agency. Said she didn't want to interrupt my re-entry vibe, whatever that meant. I shrugged it off. I checked the mail on autopilot. It had piled up like always. Most of it was junk: store flyers, pre-approved credit card offers, that catalog Lana swore she'd unsubscribed from 3 times already. I was halfway through sorting when I found it. A white envelope, nothing flashy, addressed to Lana. The return address was from a property management company in Nashville. Inside was a printed receipt. 1-bedroom apartment. 2 tenants listed. Lana Elizabeth Bradford. Zachary A. Collins. I didn't breathe for a moment. I just stared at that piece of paper like it had just changed the laws of gravity. Zachary Collins, the same Zach she had mentioned months ago over dinner, in passing. He's one of the new guys in marketing, she'd said, brushing some lint off her blouse. Kinda bland, honestly. Bland. Right? I flipped the paper over, looking for anything that might explain it away. Maybe it was a billing error? Maybe she co-signed for a friend? But the dates, that's what undid me. The rental term began the exact same week she claimed to be in Nashville for a marketing forum. She had stayed at a Marriott, she said. I'd even overnight her laptop charger to that hotel. It didn't make sense. I sat down at the kitchen island and stared at the receipt for a long time. Long enough that my legs started to fall asleep. My mind kept racing, rewinding conversations we'd had, trying to line them up with this new information. When Lana finally got home, her heels clicked against the hardwood like nothing was wrong. She smiled, kissed me on the cheek, asked how the trip was. I waited until she poured herself a glass of wine before I said anything. Got the mail, I said, sliding the receipt across the counter. She glanced at it, then looked up at me. Her eyes didn't widen. Her mouth didn't drop open. She didn't even flinch. That was the scariest part. Instead, she laughed. Laughed. Shook her head and muttered something about me being dramatic. Said it was probably a clerical mix-up. Zachary travels a lot, she said. Maybe some wires got crossed. Lana, I said, keeping my voice steady, this is a rental agreement with both your names. For an apartment. Her jaw tensed just for a second. You're overthinking this, Daniel. Am I? She sighed, suddenly defensive. Why are you always trying to catch me doing something wrong? Do you even hear yourself? You sound paranoid. Controlling. That word hit hard. She'd never called me that before. Controlling. Like I was some jealous tyrant for noticing a receipt with her name on it tied to another man. She didn't explain it. Didn't offer proof or even an excuse. Just threw the spotlight back on me like she was the victim here. The conversation died quickly after that. She grabbed her glass of wine and disappeared into the bedroom. Said she was too tired for this tonight. I sat alone at the island for a long time after she left the room, the receipt still in front of me like it was staring back. I didn't bring it up again the next morning. I just went about my day pretending everything was fine. But it wasn't. Something inside me had shifted. I'd always prided myself on being level-headed, on trusting my wife, on not jumping to conclusions. But now, the doubt wasn't just in my head. It was printed in black and white. I started replaying other moments from the past few months. The sudden increase in her work trips. The way she changed her phone's passcode, saying she needed it for client privacy. The nights she came home late, smelling faintly of cologne that didn't belong to me. I dismissed all of it. Chalked it up to the stress of her job, her ever-changing schedule. But now, those red flags weren't subtle anymore. They were flares, burning bright. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft hum of Lana's breathing beside me. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe in us. But something was broken. Or maybe it had been for a while, and I just hadn't seen it. It's a strange thing when your reality starts to bend. When the person you've shared a life with, planned a future with, suddenly feels like a stranger. You start questioning everything. Every memory. Every moment. Was she lying then? Was any of it real? I didn't have answers. Not yet. But I knew one thing with absolute clarity. I was no longer just a husband. I was a man trying to find the truth buried under layers of deception. And that receipt? That stupid, ordinary piece of paper? It was the first sign that I couldn't ignore. After the Nashville receipt, I couldn't go back to pretending. Not even a little. Something had cracked, and once the kind of fracture runs through your marriage, it's only a matter of time before the whole thing gives way. I didn't confront her again right away. I needed more than a slip of paper and a gut full of suspicion. I needed clarity. But even without solid proof, everything that used to feel like background noise started ringing like an alarm bell. It was the little things at first. Her work trips, there were more of them now, and they didn't add up. Her agency had only 3 satellite offices: Chicago, Denver, and San Francisco. Yet she was flying to places like Memphis, Charleston, Albuquerque. Client meetings, she'd say. Pop-up campaigns. Vague enough to sound plausible. But the truth is, I'd worked with marketing firms before. Nothing about her schedule looked right. Her itineraries were always handwritten, never shared by email. No booked rooms under her name, no digital trail. One afternoon, I was waiting for her in the car outside a grocery store. She ran inside to pick up wine for a dinner party. When she returned, she tossed her purse into the passenger seat and hopped in, barely glancing at me. As the engine started, her phone connected automatically to the car's Bluetooth, and that's when I saw it. ZC Hotel flashed on the screen. I didn't say anything. I just glanced at her out of the corner of my eye. Her smile faltered, but she pretended not to notice. She leaned forward, turned off Bluetooth manually, and said, "Sorry, that's work-related." That was the only explanation she offered before switching topics to something about her new creative director. Work-related, right? At home, Lana's warmth had dulled into something clinical. We used to cook dinner together, joke about our dysfunctional oven, share a bottle of wine at the table with our phones face down. Now she was always exhausted. She'd retreat into the shower, then into bed, scrolling endlessly through her phone with her back to me. I told myself it was burnout. She had been promoted recently. Maybe the pressure was too much. But then came the social media posts. The same woman who barely had energy for a walk around the block would suddenly light up online. Selfies in designer cafes. Skylines I didn't recognize. A rooftop brunch in a city I knew she wasn't supposed to be in. Her captions read like someone living their best life, reset weekend dizzy, and inspiration over imitation. She didn't tag locations often, but when she did, they never matched what she told me. And there were never photos of colleagues. Just her, sometimes an accidental arm or shadow behind her. Always cropped. Always curated. I started saving the photos. I wasn't sure what for, maybe to confirm I wasn't losing it. Maybe to line them up against the cities she claimed to be in. But mostly because I needed to stop doubting myself. The gaslighting wasn't overt. Lana wasn't cruel. She just had this way of turning everything around. If I asked too many questions, I was micromanaging. If I asked too few, I didn't care anymore. There was no right answer, just a minefield I had to tiptoe through daily. And the money god, the money. At first, it was small withdrawals. An extra 100 here, a few mystery charges there. I'd ask her about it, and she'd say it was for a new freelance project she was funding. Independent creative capital, she called it. Said it would pay off big soon. I trusted her. We always kept our accounts open. But by month 3, nearly $5,000 had disappeared. When I asked for invoices, she laughed it off, told me not to be so corporate. "You've gotten stiff, Daniel," she said one night, swirling wine in her glass. "Remember when we used to believe in taking risks?" I remembered. I also remembered when taking risks didn't involve disappearing for weekends without explanation. I started logging things, dates, locations, charges. At night, when she was asleep, I'd open our shared account history and cross-check it against her travel dates. More often than not, things didn't align. Hotel charges that weren't for the hotels she said she'd stayed in. Flights that landed in cities she'd never mentioned. I even found a dinner reservation under her email, 2 people at a romantic wine bar in Savannah. The same weekend she told me she was attending a brand development seminar in New York. Still, I didn't accuse. I waited. Watched. It got to the point where I'd hear her suitcase rolling down the hall and I wouldn't even ask where she was going anymore. She'd toss out some destination, a quick conference in Austin or a brainstorming session in Tampa, and I'd nod like it was normal. Like it made sense. One weekend, she came back late on a Sunday. Her hair was damp, like she'd just showered. She kissed me quickly and went straight to bed. I stayed up, checked her location history on our shared iPad. She had forgotten to disable syncing. She hadn't been in Tampa. She had been in Asheville. And so had Zachary Collins. His public post on LinkedIn showed him checking in at a conference center there, complete with a group photo. No sign of Lana in the image, but the timestamps overlapped perfectly. I remember sitting there on the couch, the glow of the tablet lighting up the room. I didn't even feel angry. Not in the way you'd expect. Just empty. Like someone had pulled the floor out from under me, and instead of falling, I was floating in this numb, quiet space where nothing made sense anymore. It's strange, the things you start noticing when you stop giving someone the benefit of the doubt. The change in perfume. The way she started locking her laptop. Her growing impatience with our routines. Once she came home with a new necklace, something elegant, silver, and expensive looking. When I asked about it, she said it was a gift from her boss for hitting a client goal. But I saw the box in the trash. It wasn't from her agency's usual gifting service. I didn't tell her I knew. I didn't even confront her about Asheville. Because by then I'd already made up my mind. I needed proof. Real proof. Not just patterns, not just hunches or receipts. I needed something that wouldn't just make sense to me but to anyone. Something undeniable. Because even though I felt like I was standing in a storm of half-truths and secrets, a small part of me still hoped I was wrong. That there'd be some explanation. Some way back. But more than hope, I needed certainty. And certainty was coming. I just didn't know yet how brutal it would be when I found it. It happened on a Tuesday morning, the kind of morning where nothing feels special. I was sitting at the kitchen table halfway through a cup of black coffee that had already gone cold. The house was still quiet, the sun leaking in through the blinds, casting long stripes of light across the floor. Lana had flown out the night before for another strategic branding summit. This time in Miami. At least, that's what she told me. She was running late before she left. Flustered, hair not done, one heel on, the other swinging from her fingers as she darted around the bedroom. I watched from the doorway as she checked her phone 3 times and barely looked me in the eye. We didn't even say goodbye. Just a muttered "see you Thursday" and the sound of the door closing behind her. I didn't go after her. I just stood there, staring at the now silent hallway, wondering if this was how it would all just fade out. Not with a blow-up. Not with screaming or slammed doors. Just a slow, deliberate erasure of everything we'd built. She forgot her tablet. Left it on the kitchen counter, tucked beneath a folder labeled "Workshop Deck." I noticed it that night, blinking softly from a half-dead battery. I didn't touch it, not right away. But that morning, as I sipped my coffee and the silence stretched on, it powered on by itself after a system update. The screen lit up, asking for a passcode. It didn't need one. It was synced to our home Wi-Fi, set to unlock automatically in safe locations. I hesitated for maybe 3 seconds. Then I opened it. I told myself I was just going to check her itinerary, maybe a calendar app, maybe a flight reminder. But that's not where I ended up. Instead, I saw a string of notifications from an app one didn't recognize, some off-brand encrypted messenger. The icon was a white feather against a black background. Discreet. Hidden. Like it was made for exactly what I was afraid of. I tapped it. It opened straight into a conversation. And that was it. That was the moment I stopped being the man who suspected. Because now I knew. The messages were all there. A long, running thread between her and Zachary Collins. No nicknames. No aliases. Just his name at the top of the screen, bold and unashamed. The first thing I saw was a photo, Lana in a hotel room mirror wearing the same dress she'd worn when she left last night. The caption read, "Thought this might help you sleep. Miss you already." My stomach flipped. I kept scrolling. There were messages from earlier that day, flirtatious, in asterisk mate, and chilling in their confidence. Plans to meet up after her seminar, mentions of our spot by the marina, and then the one that finally did it, the one that collapsed whatever fantasy I had left of reconciliation. Only a few more months. Lawyer said he can draft the separation paperwork whenever I'm ready. Miami's going to be our fresh start. Promise. I stared at that sentence for what felt like hours. My hands were shaking, but not from rage. It was something deeper. A kind of loss that didn't feel like death, but almost worse because it was chosen. Calculated. They had talked about me. Mocked me even. One message from her read, "He still thinks I'm in Tampa, LOL. Sometimes I feel guilty, but then I remember how checked out he's been. I deserve to feel alive again." Zachary had replied, "You don't owe him anything. He had his chance. He didn't see you like I do." The screen blurred as my vision swam. I blinked once, twice, trying to clear it. I didn't feel myself stand, but suddenly I was pacing the kitchen, tablet still in hand, trying to breathe through 1,000 thoughts crashing into each other at once. All the lies. All the careful planning. She wasn't slipping away from me, she was already gone. She just never had the decency to say it out loud. I scrolled further. More photos. One of them in bed. Lana's head on his chest. Her smile so casual, so familiar, it made me nauseous. They'd gone away together more than once. Asheville. Napa. Savannah. Miami was just their next stop. The lie she told me about the workshop? That was their cover story. There were even notes on how to divide assets, half-written drafts of texts she wanted to send me after breaking the news. She was already living in the after. I was just an obstacle she hadn't cleared yet. The worst part? There was no shame in any of it. They joked about my job, called me safe, predictable, said I was the kind of guy women grow out of. It was like reading the diary of someone who had rewritten history, where I wasn't the husband who stayed up late fixing her pitch decks or surprising her with her favorite wine after bad days. No, I was a placeholder, a filler chapter between boyfriends. I didn't finish the thread. I couldn't. I closed the app, placed the tablet gently on the counter, and walked outside. The sky was a pale, cold blue, and the wind cut through my shirt like a blade. But I needed the air. I needed something real to hold onto, because everything inside the house suddenly felt artificial. I sat on the back steps and stared at the grass, trying to remember the last time I felt like Lana and I were still in the same life together. Maybe a year ago. Maybe longer. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. What I felt was something harder, more final. Resolve. I knew what I had to do. This wasn't just emotional betrayal, it was premeditated abandonment. She had already picked her escape route. And now I had the map. I went back inside, picked up the tablet, and took *TS of everything. Every message. Every photo. Every detail that painted the picture of who she'd become and what she had done. Then I backed it up to an external drive, labeled it with the date, and locked it in my desk drawer. That afternoon I made 3 phone calls. The first was to a lawyer. The second was to a private investigator, just to ensure there wasn't more I didn't already know. And the third? The third was to myself in the mirror. I looked myself in the eye and said, "You are not crazy. You saw it. You felt it. And now you know." There's something terrifying about realizing the person you love doesn't just want out, they already are. They've boarded the train. They've planned their next life. And you? You're still standing on the platform, holding bags they never meant to carry with you. But once I had the proof, the illusion shattered. I wasn't the blind fool anymore. I was a man waking up from a long, carefully constructed dream. And I wasn't going back to sleep. You ever experience a moment so surreal, so layered in contradiction, that it feels like you're watching your life from somewhere just outside your body? That was me, standing under the chandeliers of an upscale university ballroom, the walls echoing with laughter, clinking glasses, and the kind of nostalgic music that only people in their 30s pretend to enjoy. It was Lana's 10-year college reunion. She had RSVP'd without hesitation, calling it a perfect excuse to be around real creatives again. I wasn't invited. That wasn't unusual. By then, we were well into our strange, silent unraveling. We still shared the same house, still shared space at the breakfast table, still offered half-hearted, "have a good day," but it was all scripted. The illusion had frayed, but the set pieces were still standing. What she didn't know, what she would never expect, was that I'd be there too. I hadn't planned on going, not originally. But then something happened the week before the event that changed everything, a meeting with the board. A routine business restructuring. Mundane on paper. Except I had recently accepted a promotion. Executive Director of Operations for a multi-branch holding company that quietly owned, among many other things, the creative agency Lana worked for. Her agency wasn't our main focus, just a minor investment, barely a blip on the monthly reports. But it was under our umbrella now. Under my watch. The irony? She didn't even know it. So I made a quiet call. Pulled a string here, a contact there. And just like that, I was on the guest list for the reunion, thanks to a casual connection with the alumni outreach coordinator. No red flags. No questions. Just a last-minute addition, anonymous enough not to make waves. I arrived late on purpose. When I stepped into the ballroom, I didn't scan for Lana right away. I stood back, let the energy of the room pass over me like a wave. People were hugging, laughing, pretending their lives were just polished enough to be envy-worthy. The usual. Then I saw her. She was in the center of a semicircle, holding court like a celebrity in a magazine feature, head tilted back, wine glass in hand, that bright, performative laugh that I used to think was charming. She was wearing a satin blue dress I'd never seen before, one that clung a little too perfectly, with heels that were definitely not made for dancing. Her hair was styled in loose waves, and her lips were stained a deep red that clashed with her usual neutral tones. She looked different. Not bad. Just curated. Like she dressed not for a reunion, but for a debut. Zachary wasn't there. At least, not that I saw. Maybe she came alone. Or maybe he was waiting for her afterward. Either way, it didn't matter. This wasn't about him. It was about her. About what she'd become. I drifted closer, weaving through conversations like a ghost at a party no one knew I was haunting. I could hear snippets of her talking about her agency's success, about how tough but thrilling her travel schedule had become. Someone asked about me, about her husband. And that's when the mask slipped, if only slightly. "Oh, Daniel," she said, smirking. "We're complicated. He's sweet, don't get me wrong, but he was always more into stability than risk. You know how it is, safe guy, stable paycheck, Sunday mornings with spreadsheets." The group chuckled. Not cruelly, just in that shallow, social way that makes you want to disappear. "Honestly," she added, swirling her wine, "sometimes I felt like I was married to my accountant." And then, like a final twist of the knife, she said, "But hey, every visionary needs a financial advisor, right?" They laughed louder at that. I didn't flinch. I didn't storm over. I just watched her, letting it all sink in, the casual dismissal, the thinly veiled mockery, the ease with which she rewrote our marriage for laughs. She had rewritten me. Turned 10 years of partnership into a punchline. But the joke, as it turns out, had a different ending than she expected. A week later, she received a company-wide email announcing a restructuring initiative designed to optimize leadership alignment with stakeholder priorities. It was corporate speak, deliberate and sterile. But it came with attachments. Termination notices. 7 employees were named. 5 of them had been at that reunion. 2 had chimed in when she mocked me, laughing a little too hard, offering her more wine, one of them saying, "Girl, you're doing better than the rest of us. Don't settle." Lana wasn't just on the list. She was at the top. I didn't send the notices personally. I didn't have to. HR handled the distribution, and per policy, no one saw it coming. It wasn't performance-related. It was directional repositioning. Executives never had to explain more than that. When she got home that night, she was furious. Not sad. Not broken. Furious. "They let me go," she said, pacing the kitchen, eyes wild. No warning. No severance package worth anything. Just a bland statement about alignment. What the hell does that even mean? I leaned against the counter and sipped my coffee. "That S**CKs," I said. "Didn't see that coming." She narrowed her eyes. "You don't seem surprised." I shrugged. "You've always said the agency was poorly managed." She looked like she wanted to say something, accuse me of knowing more than I was letting on. But she didn't. Maybe some part of her already knew. Or maybe she just couldn't imagine that I'd be the one pulling the strings. That night, I watched her fall apart in slow motion, not just because she lost a job, but because she realized she was no longer untouchable. She had walked into the reunion thinking she owned the room. She left it without a career. No confrontation. No theatrics. Just quiet, calculated consequences. I wasn't interested in revenge. This wasn't about making her suffer. This was about balance. About setting the record straight, not with words, but with actions. Because the thing about masks is they always slip eventually. And when they do, the fall is never graceful. You'd think after something like that, after watching her career evaporate under the fluorescent lights of an HR boardroom, she'd retreat, lick her wounds, fade into the background. But Lana? She wasn't wired like that. The very next morning, she tried to reclaim the narrative, like she always did. A barrage of texts hit my phone before I even poured my coffee. "We need to talk. Something's not right with the way this was handled. You're the only one I can trust right now." The irony of that last one would have been laughable if it weren't so pathetic. I didn't respond. By noon, the messages shifted in tone. Less composed, more frantic. "Did you know about this before it happened? Daniel, please, just call me." I didn't, because I was busy doing something far more important. Getting my life back. The day after the layoffs were finalized, I scheduled a private consultation with the attorney I had already retained weeks earlier. The same one who'd reviewed the messages, location data, financial discrepancies, and the tablet screen *TS. I'd been waiting for the right moment to act. Now I had it. We filed the divorce petition the same afternoon. The grounds? Infidelity, emotional cruelty, and financial misconduct. I included everything. Copies of the rental receipts, bank statements showing the misappropriated joint funds, screen *TS of the encrypted app, photos of her and Zachary. Everything that drew the shape of betrayal with surgical precision. When I dropped the packet off with the clerk's office, I felt light. Not vindicated, not victorious, just unburdened. The next step was freezing the accounts. My lawyer filed a motion with the court to restrict all access to shared funds, citing high-risk behavior and potential concealment of assets. The judge granted it immediately. Joint accounts were locked, pending a full financial audit. Only essential expenses could be accessed, and only through court-monitored disbursements. Lana didn't see it coming. She called that night, finally abandoning texts. I didn't answer, but she left a voicemail. Her voice was laced with panic. "Daniel, what the hell is going on? My card got declined at the pharmacy. I tried to pay our mortgage and the app froze. Did you do something?" Click. The next day, she tried coming by the house. Our house. But I had already filed for temporary exclusive occupancy, and the motion had been approved. When she pulled into the driveway, she was met by a deputy and a court order taped to the front door. She was no longer permitted on the property without legal clearance. I watched from the upstairs window as she argued with the officer, her arms flailing, her voice rising even from across the yard. She looked like a stranger. Not the woman I'd once waited up for with takeout and a movie queued up. Not the woman I'd shared holidays with. She looked like someone losing control and hating it, and I wasn't done. In parallel with the divorce, we filed a formal complaint with the State Financial Oversight Committee. The complaint detailed her unauthorized use of joint marital funds, expenses that included travel, gifts, and accommodations linked directly to Zachary Collins. Misappropriation of marital property. The kind of charge that doesn't just affect court rulings, it sticks to professional records. The fallout began almost immediately. Her assets were placed under temporary review. Her freelance invoices were flagged. Payments stalled. Vendors withdrew. Creditors, some of whom had been conveniently ignored during her escapades, started circling like vultures. And Zachary? He vanished. A contact of mine in the legal field mentioned he'd been served preliminary divorce papers of his own. Turns out he had a wife in Charleston and 2 kids under the age of 6. Lana wasn't just a mistress. She was a liability. Whatever promises he'd made, they evaporated the moment real consequences showed up. She tried contacting me again. Voicemails turned to emails. The tone shifted from panic to bargaining. "Can we just talk before lawyers get too involved? I'm willing to admit fault if we can settle this quietly. We don't have to destroy each other over this." But she didn't understand. This wasn't about destruction. It was about clarity. For years, I had let her define the temperature of our marriage. When we talked, how we talked, what was worth bringing up. She controlled the rhythm, and I kept pace like a fool, convinced we were dancing when really, I was being led to the edge of a cliff. Now I was writing the tempo, and the next measure was silence. My legal team kept her legal team busy. There were discovery demands, asset disclosures, subpoenaed correspondence. I watched from a distance as her carefully curated world fell apart. Not in flames, but in silence. Contracts evaporated. Clients hesitated. And slowly, the truth about her side projects and brand retreats began to seep into places she couldn't scrub. One day, her sister called me. We'd always been civil, close even. She asked if there was any chance Lana and I could talk like adults. I told her gently, firmly, that we had. Through lawyers. Through court orders. Through evidence. "I never thought it would get this bad," she said quietly. "Neither did I replied. "But here we are." What I didn't say, what I couldn't say, is that it was always heading here. You can only stretch a lie so far before it snaps. Lana had built an entire alternate life, one flirtation at a time, one lie at a time, and she never thought she'd have to answer for any of it. Because people like her, people who rewrite history mid-conversation, don't think about consequences. Only performance. Until the curtain falls. And me? I wasn't angry anymore. Not in the screaming, red-faced way people expect. My anger had cooled into something sharper, something clear. I had no desire to punish her. I wasn't building a trap. I was just reclaiming my space. Piece by piece. Truth by truth. And the best part? I didn't raise my voice once. It didn't take long for the walls to close in. With the accounts frozen, her reputation stained, and no fallback plan that didn't include a man now drowning in his own marriage mess, Lana had nowhere to pivot. She applied for jobs in her field, but the background checks didn't lie. Companies whispered about the scandal, the unexplained dismissal, the financial complaint. Even the startups she reached out to didn't bite. Too risky. Too visible. She tried freelancing. That fizzled fast. Her name was too attached to the agency she'd helped implode. No one wanted that kind of baggage, especially when invoices and contracts were now under investigation. Zachary, meanwhile, was quietly pulled into his own legal battle. His wife filed for divorce and subpoenaed travel logs, financial records, and correspondence. I didn't have to lift a finger. The truth followed him like smoke after fire. The collateral damage Lana never anticipated? It was already happening in parallel, far beyond her control. She moved out of her temporary rental after 3 weeks, couldn't afford it. Last I heard, she was couch surfing with a former colleague. The same colleague who once toasted her at that reunion. The court ruled in my favor. Full rights to the house. No alimony. Her misappropriation of funds left her with no legal ground to demand a dime. Every attempt her lawyer made to argue marital contribution was met with irrefutable documentation. It was open and shut. I didn't celebrate. I just exhaled. Freedom isn't loud. It's not some grand exit or a blaze of glory. It's quiet. Subtle. It's waking up and realizing your chest doesn't hurt anymore. That's what it felt like. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't analyzing every trip, every excuse, every late-night text. The silence in the house wasn't tension, it was peace. Lana reached out once more after the final hearing. No apology. Just a hollow message. I didn't think it would end like this. But it didn't just end. It unraveled, thread by thread, because she kept pulling at the fabric and pretending it wouldn't tear. I didn't reply. Instead, I built something new, around honesty, around calm, around people who see me without trying to reshape me. This wasn't revenge. It was self-respect. She mocked me once in a crowded room, thinking I was the fool. But the moment she laughed was the moment she began to lose everything. And I walked away with mine intact.